everyone, and welcome to episode 6 of the TAP HR podcast. It makes me so excited that I get to sit here and do this and that people are buying in and enjoying the podcast, so thank you to everybody that showed us support. Today you've just got me, but hopefully that'll be enough, and today we're going to be talking about quiet quitting. So a lot of you might have heard about this term already. So it was originally coined by a TikToker talking about his views about how he was feeling about the world of work, and that one TikTok video has had over 482,000 views, which is ridiculous. And within that video he talks about how he's no longer subscribing to the hustle culture. He's no longer going to suspend his work-life balance to be doing things that are above and beyond for his role, and how he doesn't feel that work should be life, and that actually he's just going to do what he wants to do in relation to just doing his role, not going above and beyond, just doing his role in its entirety. People have started talking about people that are, in their view, kind of hardly working, and it's kind of turned into this topic that a lot of people have been talking about. For me, quiet quitting really should be split into two separate factions. So the first one being, I guess, what the original TikToker was talking about. So that view that you're not going to have your work encroach into your life and you want to focus on your work-life balance. To me, quiet quitting for that really isn't the right term. I don't think saying that somebody is doing their role and focusing on their work-life balance means they're quitting their job. I think that means that they're putting some time into them and they're doing what they're contractually obliged to do. But on the other hand, if you've got people who, and I suppose this would be a second definition, if you've got people who just don't want to be at work, are disengaged, are putting in the bare minimum, to me that's a very different thing, and to me that is a problem. Whereas that first definition of somebody just effectively really taking care of themselves, actually that's not something that I would consider to be quitting in any sense. I think that's somebody taking a perhaps different, you don't know whether or not people are already working that way, but perhaps taking a different view of how to approach work and what's important to them, as opposed to quitting. I think fundamentally for that first definition I gave you, I think the term quiet quitting doesn't work. But for the second term, where we're talking about someone who just doesn't want to be there and is putting in the bare minimum, yeah, the term does work, but they're very, very different things. And essentially what we're talking about here is engagement, right? So we're talking about how engaged your people are in being in the workplace. And that is something that as employers you can obviously look to deal with and look to manage. And I think sometimes when we're talking about engagement and what we expect from our employers, or employees even, we forget that our people make our business. So yes, I'm a people person, yes, I work in HR, but I think sometimes it's really easy to forget that businesses don't run without people, or at least they don't right now. We haven't got into that whole Terminator Genesis situation where a machine's taken over, but at the moment people make our business. And I think if you see issues with engagement within your people, talk to them. I think that's the easiest thing to be able to do, is talk to your people, find out how they're feeling, have ways to be able to understand where their heads are at, and look to address any issues that you've got with people being engaged. Now, if you've got people who aren't doing their job, well, then that's different, and we've got different ways of dealing with that. But if you've got someone whose behaviour changes, so if you've got someone who was giving their all, putting everything in, and then all of a sudden they're working to rule, well, then that probably is going to be a bigger problem and a bigger issue, or it's highlighting that there's something underlying there that you need to have a look at. So there's a bunch of research that's going around which is being attributed to quiet quitting, although as I've said, in my view, I think there's two different definitions. We've got a professor at the university in Northampton who's been talking about how there's been a noticeable fall in job satisfaction in workers, which in my view could potentially be linked to the changes that we've had to make with the way that the world has gone with COVID, and we've had to go to hybrid working. So when you've got a lot of people who are working from home, it's so much easier to be putting in extra, it's so much easier to be working longer hours, but that can, in some cases, have a detriment to your work-life balance, and also it can have an impact on your psychological contract with your employer. So if you're putting in a bunch of extra work and doing a lot of extra stuff, and so therefore kind of engaging more in work, and your employer isn't kind of reciprocating, or you don't feel like you're rewarded in any way for doing that, then that might lead to you feeling like, well, do you know what, I'm only going to do what I need to do, I'm not going to do extra. So again, from an employer's perspective, you need to be thinking about keeping an eye on your staff, understanding what it is that how they're feeling and what it is that they're doing, and seeing those shifts in behaviour. If you see a real shift in engagement, then that itself can be an issue. We've also had things like the Great Resignation, or we are allegedly on the cusp of the Great Resignation if it hasn't already happened. I think people are debating where we are with that at the moment. But you've got people thinking differently about work, people thinking about, you know, how they want to live their lives differently because of hybrid working. And again, as an employee, you need to be thinking about how you can deal with that and how you can buck those trends. So for me, as I say, I think there's two totally different definitions of quiet quitting. So there's that more traditional, and I say traditional, I think it's something that's only come up in the last few weeks really, but that traditional view of people almost safeguarding their work-life balance, which to me, absolutely fine, don't see an issue with that. If it's something that encroaches on someone's ability to be able to do their work, then perhaps that's something that you need to talk to them about. But we should be encouraging our employees to be working to their contracted terms and also having a good work-life balance, and we should, as employers, be aiding that. But if we're talking about that second definition, so that person that is checked out and just doesn't want to be in work, is doing the bare minimum, and you're seeing a shift from their behaviour, and that there's a shift from being a diligent employee to that, then that's an issue. And that's, to me, is about engagement, not necessarily quietly quitting, although I can see how the term kind of works in that second definition. So if you've got someone in that situation, we need to be having a chat with those people, not just those people, everyone in your business. I would always recommend that you have something that allows you to kind of keep an eye on trends within your business and see whether or not people's views and feelings are moving and shifting. And I would always recommend kind of making sure that you've got an environment where people have clear employee voice. So if people aren't happy and things are changing, they're able to talk to you. And depending on kind of where you are with your employee culture, you could make it so that that is something that's kind of very kind of clear and you know who that information is coming from. Or if you're trying to grow that kind of culture, you could do that on an anonymous basis so that you can understand how people are feeling and what they're thinking really. But for me, that kind of regular temperature check and understanding of how people are feeling is really important. And there are lots of tools out there that you can use to see how employees are feeling. Obviously, there are various businesses that I'm associated with, like Thermometrics. There are also other companies out there that will help you with managing and keeping an eye on the temperature within your business. So I think that's probably all I've got on quiet quitting. I could go on and on, but for me there's two different definitions. That first definition for me about work-life balance, that I don't think the term fits, and that second definition where I think it does, but actually realistically we're just repackaging talking about employee engagement. So I hope that was really helpful. I would love to hear your thoughts on quiet quitting. Feel free to pop me an email at hithere@taphr.co.uk. Tell me a little bit more about what you think on quiet quitting.